Thank you very much. Thank you, Blair, and thanks to all of you for being here this week, and to the Women of Reformed Judaism for inviting me. Thank Robin Cohen for being our interim executive director and the board of directors, and thank you, Rabbi Yaffe, for those wonderful words and for your tireless work as a champion. I don't know if he's left us, but incredible champion for women's health. I thought actually his words were perfect, that this is a time, it's in difficult times that we have to draw our strength from being together. So there's no more important time, I think, for all of you to be together. I was really glad to learn, too, that you have 200 youth leaders who are here as part of this, who are also going to spend time on Capitol Hill. So I'd love to just give it up for the youth leaders and thank them for being the next generation of our work. And thank you to Lynn, who moderated the call to action back in March in the middle of a lot of these crises that we were dealing with at Planned Parenthood, and for the amazing support of so many of you in the battle to defend access to preventive care at Planned Parenthood during the federal budget battle. It was great to meet Lynn and a lot of you I've got to see on the road out in the countryside, and I love being at the Religious Action Center's consultation on conscience in May. We're so inspired by the commitment of the Jewish community to social justice and to women's rights, and in particular, of course, Jewish women, for being such extraordinary leaders at this time, to standing up for a healthier world in the spirit of Tikkun Olam. So I was born in Waco, Texas, which I don't, okay, let's hear it for Waco. Yeah, a few good things have come out of Waco, but it's actually kind of funny because both my folks, they grew up in Waco and they went to Baylor, which is a Baptist school, I think, as most of you know, and that where Mom said everything that they did was that much more fun and exciting because it was either against the rules or it was a sin. In fact, she claims that they were at Baylor and in Waco, having sex standing up was banned because people might think you were dancing. But Mom, true enough, you got to come visit and see. But Mom went to Baylor actually on a debate scholarship, but where she first learned to totally kind of rip it up as a public speaker was at Waco High School, where she was on the debate team, and she met and began a lifelong friendship with fellow debater, the great Dolores Cosberg-Wilkenfeld, who is with us here tonight. And you're out there somewhere, Dolores, I know. Dolores has been a crusader for social justice and the rights of women her entire life, and I'm sure that a lot of that was born out of those early days at Waco High School. And Mom was thrilled many years later in 1994 to travel to Ellis Island to be part of the World Union for Reformed Judaism, honoring Dolores. And Mom would be so happy that we're all here today carrying on in support of women's health and rights. So Dolores, wherever you are out there, thank you for all your work on behalf of us all. Well, I'll come find you later. Because my mom was an activist, first and foremost, and maybe it was those early years fighting at Baylor that taught her to stand up for what she believed in. But, you know, it was like as a kid, we were into every movement that came through Dallas, Texas. It didn't matter what it was. She dragged us to the grocery store to see if the lettuce had the UFW label on it. Fighting the poll tax to make sure that people could vote. The dinner table wasn't where you ate, it's where you sorted precinct lists for whatever campaign that she was involved in. But it was fun, and as kids, I think we just grew up believing, as many of you did in your families, that social justice was something you fought for. And it wasn't until later that when we moved to Austin that Mom actually got to work on her first campaign. A young woman wanted to run for office, and in those days, women didn't run for office in Texas. She was a young woman lawyer and wanted to be in the state legislature, and so as kids, we got to all be involved, and Mom decided to run the campaign, and we learned all those critical political skills of handing out bumper stickers and, stuffing envelopes. And against all odds, this young woman won and actually went to the state legislature, and her name was Sarah Weddington. Exactly, and who is still fighting on the forefront. Not only argued the case of Roe versus Wade at the age of 26 before the Supreme Court of the United States, forever changing life for women in America, and Sarah is still out there fighting for women's rights every single day. we stand on the shoulders of those who came before, but for me, it's such an honor because I feel like in many ways, my life now at Planned Parenthood, I've sort of come full circle. And of course, it was, then Mom got the bug and she decided, well, heck, this running for office thing looks okay, and she ran herself. And sometimes I like to remember this because I just think in these very dark and difficult political times, it's important to remember that even in Texas, there was a moment when progressives came together of all stripes and elected the first and only fully pro-choice woman governor ever of the state of Texas, Cecile Richards. And so that was, if we can do that, we can turn this country around. And I do want to say, too, it wasn't until Mom was elected governor that she got to make her first trip to visit Israel and made a profound connection with the folks she met there, with Jewish history and beliefs. She always thought it was ironic that she was born a Baptist. I think she really was meant to be a Jew. And she tried to make up for it. You know, she later went on to be on the board of Brandeis University. I'm very proud that my eldest daughter, Lily, graduated from Brandeis a couple of years ago. And she's now serving as the press secretary of one of our most incredible new champions for women's rights in the United States Senate, Senator Dick Blumenthal from the great state of Connecticut. And I just think, wouldn't her grandmother be proud? It's just all sort of wonderful. So I think though, if you believe in women's rights, which we do, if you believe in our potential, it's both the best of times and the worst of times. Because we have made so much progress in this country, and we can't forget that. That women now are graduating from college and professional schools more than ever before. And now a third of the doctors in this country are women, and it's only growing. Nearly half of the law school students are women, and in 2010, for the first time ever, women became the majority of the United States workforce. Everything is changing for us, right? I know, it's worth applauding the progress that we've made. And yet, as you know, there's a lot of folks, though, who want to take us backwards. And this past year at Planned Parenthood and across the country, we've experienced, and certainly I've experienced, the most mean-spirited attacks on women's health and rights that we have seen in decades. And for those of us, and all of us here, who work every day to expand healthcare access for women and to ensure basic, fundamental reproductive rights, who believe in providing honest, accurate sex education to young people. It's been an all-out assault ever since the new Congress came to Washington, D.C. And the thing that's so important, and I know you know this, is that this new Congress is not just against legal abortion. They're against basic access to birth control for women in America in the 21st century. One of their very first acts in a time in which this country is concerned about jobs and the economy and the future of our children and their opportunities. One of the very first acts of the new House of Representatives was to vote overwhelmingly to ban access for women to Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is the largest family planning provider in the country, but this was to ban all preventive care through Planned Parenthood. And again, I want to sort of remind people, it had absolutely nothing to do with abortion. As you know, federal funding was lost and outlawed for abortion through the Hyde Amendment over 30 years ago, and it's wrong, and ever since, low-income women in this country have suffered as a result, and we've got to fight to turn it around. But the really sad irony of what this new Congress has done is they've actually banned everything we do for patients that help prevent unintended pregnancy or help detect cancer early on, prevent the spread of disease. Last year, more than 90% of services for our 3 million patients were for preventive care. So just, I could run through the list. We provided birth control to nearly 2.5 million people, breast exams to 830,000 women, nearly 1 million pap smears, more than 4 million STDs and treatments for young people. The list goes on and on. And so I believe if this Congress really wanted to do something about reducing abortion in the United States of America, they would be volunteering at Planned Parenthood health centers all across the country. Because we do more every day to prevent unintended pregnancy and the need for abortion than this U.S. House of Representatives will do in a lifetime. Exactly, but that is not that. But as you know now, and it's sort of now budget shutdowns seem to be sort of like more common, but last spring, we actually literally were about to shut down the federal government. We were down to the very last hours of whether or not we would shut down the entire government, ready to disrupt the lives of millions of folks in this country. And Speaker John Boehner went to the Oval Office. Literally, it was that day. And his demand, at a time of historic economic crisis, unemployment, his demand in exchange for a budget agreement from the president was to end funding for Planned Parenthood. I'm not even making this up. And seriously, as was reported in the New York Times that weekend, President Obama had 2 words: nope, zero. And Speaker Boehner went at it again, and the president said, John, this is it. The president of the United States drew the line literally in the Oval Office over the issue of Planned Parenthood. And that's why we have to have a president of the United States who stands for women and stands for women's health, by God. So the very next week, the Senate voted actually up or down on Planned Parenthood, and I want to remind people we won that vote 58-42, every single Democrat in the United States Senate, but 5 very brave pro-Planned Parenthood, pro-choice Republicans. So can we hear it for the pro-choice Republicans in this country who believe the government has no place in the bedroom or in our doctor's office? The sum of all this, though, and there was hilarious stories through the whole thing, but I think the result of this is important to remember, and I've been an organizer all my life. The result is that Planned Parenthood actually grew stronger. 1 in 5 women in America has been to Planned Parenthood for health care, and I swear in the last year I've heard from every single one of them. When Congress voted to defund us, it was like a wildfire that went out across America. We got more than 1 million brand new activists, and half of them are young people as a result of this fight with Congress. And this is really important because a lot of folks say to me, well, young people, they don't appreciate all that we did for them and they don't know the fights we went through. Well, by God, this year they did. They understood that they had to be on the front lines of fighting for birth control and fighting for Planned Parenthood and fighting for the things they will believe in. And also, of course, as always happens, we've been in these fights before, frequently it was our own opponents that did us the most good. So I'd just like to give credit here for a couple of folks who, Senator John Kyle from Arizona, who went to the Senate floor to say, in fact, that more than 90% of what Planned Parenthood did was abortion. And when he got called out on it, of course, they threw as cannon fodder the poor press person who had to say, well, actually, it wasn't intended to be a factual statement. But again, it allowed us the opportunity to tell the American people who we were and what we did. Or one of my favorite moments was about to go on Rachel Maddow when Glenn Beck went on his show to say that only hookers go to Planned Parenthood. Well, the great news is we heard from a lot of non-hookers who go to Planned Parenthood. And it was a beautiful moment, and I remember reading this woman's post on Facebook right as I was going on. She said, I guess he doesn't know that a lot of us military wives go to Planned Parenthood when the doctor on base can't see us. But then perhaps my favorite moment in all of the defunding fight was when Fox News and their newscasters went on to say, well, women didn't need Planned Parenthood. They could go to Walgreens for their pap smears. Yeah, do you remember that? Seriously, I'm not making this stuff up. You couldn't make it up. But this is the great thing, of course, then immediately Walgreens puts out a press release saying, please, women, do not come to Walgreens for your pap smears. But I know, it's just you gotta laugh to keep from crying. But the wonderful thing, and then of course our friend Stephen Colbert, who should get a Nobel Peace Prize for, but Stephen Colbert just couldn't let it die, so of course he went on that night and said, women, definitely, you can now go to Walgreens for your pap smears. Just look for the stirrups in between the kitty litter and the Swiffer refills, and there you're gonna go. Anyway, but it was this moment at which people really focused and support grew. And of course, I don't want to be a competitive person, but I just did happen to see the most recent national polling on us and on Congress. Planned Parenthood's approval rating is now at 68%, and Congress's is at 9%. Okay, so anyway. But you were a huge part of that, and that's what I want to say. Is this was a movement, and this was an effort and a grassroots effort that you rallied your congregations and your sisterhoods, and I appreciate all that you've been doing to stand not only against the onslaught of Planned Parenthood, but all the measures that are being introduced across the country in legislatures, because these battles are far from over, and they're not only in Washington, D.C., as we know. So we have to be vigilant, and we've got to be organized, because I really do believe, as the great Dr. Martin Luther King said, the arc of the universe, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it does bend towards justice. But we've got a lot of work to do. But there are some things that give me hope, because I don't want to ever leave without people feeling like there's hope out there. First, the most incredible act ever passed to provide health care to women, the Affordable Care Act, is going to revolutionize access for women in this country to basic preventive care, and we have to really acknowledge that and own that. But we've got to do a lot of education to women about what it means, because they do not know. 34 million more Americans are going to be insured as a result. For the first time in our history, insurance companies cannot ask you to pay more because you're a woman for health care coverage. They can't deny you a health care coverage for any kind of pre-existing conditions. In fact, being a woman is no longer a pre-existing condition in America. This is extraordinarily important. And one of my favorite moments in the Affordable Care Act, again, Senator John Kyl, he's just like the gift that keeps on giving, arguing with Senator Debbie Stabenow about whether maternity benefits should be required in insurance programs. Can you believe this? Senator Kyl said, well, he didn't think we needed to require them because he was never going to need them. Seems a little obvious. But Senator Debbie Stabenow from Michigan was so fabulous, she came right back, exactly, she came right back at him. She said, well, I bet your mother did. So the Affordable Care Act is a huge opportunity for us, and one of the most important things that happened, and it was announced this summer, is that women's preventive care is now going to be covered for no copay, and that includes birth control for the first time in America. That includes birth control. But everything we get, you don't get it without a fight. And as you may know, the Republican Party, the Republican leadership in Congress, and the National Conference of Bishops is fighting like the Dickens to try to eliminate birth control coverage for women who work at religious hospitals. And we have got to fight this. I hope every single one of you will call the White House and tell them not to cave in on this very, very important issue for American women, because it's an issue of values and it's an issue of economics. Because we've seen what happens when we don't and when we're not vigilant. And last week, we got a terrible decision, in my opinion, rejecting over-the-counter status, finally, for emergency contraception for Plan B. And this is what I think is a tough lesson of what can happen when you assume things are going to be done that benefit women without really the fight. So they've got to hear from us, and I hope you'll call about the birth control issue. So I'm very hopeful about women's access to health care. We're going to get beyond this. I'm hopeful, too, because we keep investing in new things that bring more access to women. Because people sometimes say, like, how are you not just so depressed about the current state of affairs? But I'll tell you one good example. We've been investing in technology at Planned Parenthood and being able to provide information and access that was unthinkable just a few years ago. So picture this. 95 years ago, Margaret Sanger was arrested for handing out birth control, not birth control, literally birth control information to women in Brooklyn. And a movement was born. Well, now, 95 years later, through Planned Parenthood Online, which is our portal on the web, we were going to provide access to birth control information to more than 30 million people this year alone, okay? And each year it grows. So sometimes you just have to take measure and realize that we're actually making progress. And in fact, now young people, I don't know about you, but my kids, if it's not on their mobile phone, it doesn't exist in the world, right? So now young people can find Planned Parenthood on their mobile phone. And we're now piloting a program where they can text and chat with Planned Parenthood on issues that they may not be able to talk to anyone else about. In fact, I was reading a story the other night, a young woman who texted with us, who said, she just texted, I'm a teenager, I'm helpless, and I'm scared. And so we were able to text back immediately with her and say, well, it's great that you contacted Planned Parenthood, and We went back and forth with her about her issue, and she was in a very tough situation, and she needed to get into a health center, and we made those arrangements. But as we wrapped up the chat with her, the person on the other end at our call center texted back to her and said, do you have everything you need? And she texted back, I think you've answered all my questions for now, thanks. And she put a little smiley face emoticon at the end. But then she texted back a few minutes later and said, but could I come back here later tonight if I still have questions? That's so powerful, right? I mean, to me, that is our future. That is our promise, is to be able to deliver care and information for young people, for this next generation, to let them have the healthiest life they can possibly have. And that's the good news. And I think the other good news is borne out in places like Mississippi, where when people get organized and people talk about the issues that matter, even in a state like Mississippi, you can defeat a personhood initiative by 58 points, which is absolutely unbelievable. And it was because folks are not willing to turn their back on women and women's care and women's health care in this country. So we got to be here. We got to be present, which you are, and not only for the next generation in healthcare, but also to build this next generation of advocates and activists. And this was really brought home to me. Again, I've been an organizer all my life, but even all I've seen, I can get really inspired by meeting this next generation of young people. So we had thousands of people who'd come to Washington at the very brink of this vote in the United States Senate and to rally and to lobby Congress. And we were at the mall in Washington. And there were thousands of our supporters that they gathered there for the rally before they went over. And as I looked out on the stage, there was this beautiful sea of pink Planned Parenthood t-shirts and pink signs, and probably some of you were there. And a friend of mine, Wade Henderson, who is the head of the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights, and Wade Henderson has been through every important civil rights and social justice battle in this country and in our history. And he leans over to me and has this big smile on his face, and he says, look at all these young people. And he was exactly right, because that's who was there. Most of the audience had grown up long after the Roe decision. And after the rally, I got together with some of the teenagers to ask them what they thought. And there was a young woman, Sonia, from Northern California, who got up to speak. And so she got to the microphone and she said, well, you know, I'd never been to Washington, D.C. before. I'd never been to a rally. But I was standing there yesterday, and I saw in front of me the United States Capitol, and then behind me, there was the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument. And I realized that all the important marches for social justice had happened in that spot, and that we were part of making history. And they were. This past year has been a very special year for me for a lot of reasons. But one was that I was invited to visit Israel for the first time with an incredible delegation of women. I just get verklempt thinking about it. You know, from Jerusalem to the West Bank, to getting to dip into the Sea of Galilee. And we were blessed to meet the most extraordinary women. Some women I will never forget, like those at the Hadassah Medical Center. Unbelievable. Providing health care to women and families of all faiths and backgrounds, women working for peace. I know the entire Jewish community will be celebrating Hanukkah next week, and the story behind that holiday, obviously, of the Maccabees and the victory against all odds should be an inspiration to everyone who cares about a healthier world for women and for families. So as you're lighting the candles and recalling that timeless tale of triumph and hope, remember that no matter how imposing our opponents may seem, they cannot and they will not keep us down. History is on our side, and our flame will illuminate the darkness. Don't let the light go out. Thank you very much, and God bless. Thank you. Thank you.